Hello and welcome to episode number 114 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And after a wild week one where a bunch of matchups flipped on the last day, this week was a little bit quieter. Not a whole lot to write home about matchup wise, but couple big trades and still at least one upset that there was this week.
Yeah. One big upset, but otherwise we're in a bunch of super close matchups. I did like your phrase as well. Not much to write home about.
Yeah.
Wonder where you just heard that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
But
plan on writing anything to my house about.
yeah, yeah.
But
Nobody mail anything they can. So it's
no,
the rule.
please
This
do
we'll
not.
see next week.
I will not be expecting any letters. But yeah, we did have a couple trades. They're both the first one was a little controversial, and the second one was a bit of a blockbuster. Let's start out here with the first one, though. Erik sent Andres Munoz and Brian Anderson to Ruthvik for Von Grissom. We had differing opinions on this one, but why don't you start?
Yeah, I feel like Brian Anderson's been talked about enough in Slack, so I'm just not going to get into that again. Uh, I think it was Erik who summed it up best. I think it was Erik who said it's the trade is basically Andres Munoz for Von Grisham. And I don't like this for Ruthvik. I don't think from a value perspective, it is the worst trade. I get the upside with Andres Munoz. He showed it. He could easily be a top five reliever. I have no doubt about that. But it's been well documented here the offensive struggles that Ruthvik has had. Although, as an aside, he has been hitting very well the first 2 weeks, interestingly enough. But he's touted Grisham for a while as this, as this one of his solutions to the shortstop position. And I know when Grissom got sent down, I think Ruthvik was questioning it a little bit. One of his logics for making the trade was that, Grissom, might not come up for a while, might not contribute. And, he was also concerned with how Grissom ended last season. So in both of those are points I disagree with. Like one, I think everybody knew, they were sending Grissom down to help improve on his defense, but there was never really any questions about his bat from the Braves perspective. Now, I mean, the jury's still out as to whether he'll be able to keep it up well enough from a fantasy perspective, but I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about him, and he fills a pretty big hole that Ruthvik has. Whereas Andres Munoz, very solid reliever, but and I get that Ruthvik needs to replace the Edwin Diaz hole, but I feel like it is comparatively easier for him to go out and find that reliever in free agency or wherever else for a cheaper price than it would have been for him to, then instead of giving up like a top 50 prospect, one who is major league ready and one who fills a hole. So it I don't think it's the
I'm not
worst from a value
impressed with
perspective.
the prospect anymore.
Okay.
I don't.
I take that back. Not a prospect, you're right, because he was on the NPI, but he's still a very highly regarded young player who I think the Braves think is a big part of their future, and I also think is a very solid bat. So I don't know. I don't really understand the logic about Ruthvik.
Yeah, I'm just not super into Von Grissom. I can't get excited about him. He had a 350 BABIP last year. He struck out. I guess he didn't strike out that much, but I don't know. I don't really love the profile, and he doesn't really have a lot of speed to pair with it either. I'm not super confident in him keeping this up into this season. And I think Munoz is a good get, and I think Brian Anderson's a guy who and we don't need to talk more about Brian Anderson, but he got off to a good start of the year. He's hitting the ball hard. Maybe he's someone to put in your lineup for a week, and if he's not, if at the end of the week he's not hitting, then you can cut him. That's not a big loss. But Um, kind of like I I added Freddie Galvis as a throw into a trade in 2021 just because I was down a shortstop and I figured he's a little bit better than what was in free agency.
That's fair. I'll push back on a couple quick points here. You said no speed. He had 32 stolen bases between three levels last year. So I think there's definitely some speed. He was also 21 when he came up last year. So, I think there's some added context in how you have to evaluate the performance. And not only was he 21, he came straight from double A. He played 22 games in double A, and he had never played, but his highest level before that was high A. He didn't play any other games in double A. Triple A, the first time he played in triple A was this year. And I think he still performed pretty well given the circumstances. So I don't think the jury is out on him by any stretch of the imagination. But I think you might be right at the end of the day that, like, hey, maybe he doesn't become this super awesome player. Maybe he ends up being more of a super utility guy. I'm not sure. But if I'm Ruthvik and I need the offense, it doesn't really make sense to me to tout him as this guy who you expect to play a prominent role in your shortstop mix this year and then just quickly jettison him. Uh, uh, you know, the second he gets sent down to the minor leagues and looks like that he maybe might not, as a 22-year-old, play 162 games in the majors, this season.
Yeah, well, I think I don't know, and he's back up now too, right?
Yeah, so I mean, one of Ruthvik's whole things is like, I don't know when he's going to be up because they have Orlando Arcia there. Maybe they call up Braden Schubach, and then Arcia landed on the IL like a day later with a fractured wrist. And now Grissom is back up. So,
Well, yeah, that's not too surprising, I suppose. They're gonna give him a shot no matter what. I'm just not the most confident uh he'll hit like he did last year, but that's okay. There's a more interesting trade that's
oh, hold on.
worth talking about a little
Let's before we get into that other trade, and I kind of love the dichotomy here. We haven't really talked about it from Erik's perspective. Both Erik and Jake needed second baseman this offseason. And Erik did not fill that hole this offseason. Jake did, with Gleyber Torres. We'll talk about him in a second. Erik tried Michael Massey, tried Orlando Arcia, and now I think Von Grissom is gonna be that guy who slots in there. So I think Erik did a great job of identifying a need and filling it. So I think this is a perfect roster fit for him. And I trust Erik's ability to find more relievers. I know Erik is more Holtz focused anyway, and I think Munoz looks like a guy who's eventually going to take over that saves role. So I think at some point he was probably going to trade Munoz anyway. So I think he cashed out nicely. But
I just don't. I just can't get excited about Von Grissom.
fair enough. We can have different opinions, but let's talk about a team that created a hole at second base. Talk about that trade. You were just transitioning into that. This happened earlier today. Jake kind of teased that a trade would be happening, and then Anthony just kind of announced it. Team Resnick agreed to trade Ramon Laureano, Mackenzie Gore, prospects Emmanuel Rodriguez and Adele Amador to go with the flow for Gleyber Torres, David Peterson, Will Brennan, Cade Horton, and Jake's 2026 third round pick. I went first last time. You go first this time.
Yeah, it's a weird trade, huh? Like, Gleyber Torres, I was off him for a year or two, but I'm kind of back on the hype train. I took him in Gallardo Cup. By the way, I'm going to be the only team that's 4-0 combined between Dynasty League and Dynasty Gallardo. But more on that later. Yeah, no, I'm all over Gleyber this year, and he's off to a great start. He's still very young. And I think he's a great get for Anthony, who had been acquiring a lot of youngish pitchers. Now he gets a youngish bat to slide into that lineup very nicely. I think David Peterson and Will Brennan don't excite me, but Cade Horton's an interesting interesting pitching prospect. I think he's a good get. Ramon Laureano has never been someone I've liked. The two prospects, Rodriguez and Amador, are good gets for Jake. And Mackenzie Gore's, former number one pitching prospect in the league. He's with Washington now, and he's off to an okay start to the year. He's walking a lot of guys in his first three starts. And that was an issue last year as well. I'm worried about the walk rate. But he's still showing flashes at the major league level that he can be really good, and he's still only 24, so I'm not quite worried yet that this is a pattern. And he's a good guy to bank on, but I don't know. I'm just not sure that Jake's in the position to make a deal like this, giving up on Gleyber Torres. Because who's he got at second base? Is he really sure Edward Julian is the guy to step in immediately at second base? Like he's a decent prospect. He's fine, but I'm not. He's had 14 at bats at the major league level ever. If you're the defending champion, is this what you want to run out there?
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe from a value perspective, you can make arguments that this isn't super far off. Like, I think Amador and Rodriguez, I think Rodriguez is definitely a top 50 prospect and maybe even closer, sorry, to top 25.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
This is an interesting one for Jake. I think, from a value perspective, I think you could argue that, this is relatively even. I mean, Gleyber's 26-year-old second baseman, very solid, right? The prospects that Jake acquired are guys that I really like. I think Emmanuel Rodriguez and Adele Amador are both in that top 50 prospect range. I think Emmanuel Rodriguez especially might be pushing more of that top 25. But it's not like Jake is lacking in prospects. He has a lot of interesting guys in his farm. And like you said, he just came off winning a championship. And this is not the behavior of a team that just has come off winning a championship and wants to win, back-to-back championships and keep that trophy. Jake had a major hole at second base this offseason. I think that was probably his biggest offensive weakness. I thought he effectively filled it. And, after a couple of weeks, he's basically said, I'm done with this solution. And it's not like Gleyber's played bad or got injured or anything. If anything, I think his stock has gone up. And I think that kind of is reflected in the price that Jake got back. Jake got more for Gleyber than he gave up. I do not think Mason Wynn was a ton to give up compared to the multiple top 50 prospects and Ramon Laureano and Mackenzie Gore he got here. But it feels like a weird time to cash out.
I agree. I think like if Edward Julian was breaking out, he was having a great start to the season. If he had had 100 plate appearances and was doing well, and Jake wasn't able to send him back down, then I'd say, yeah, this is a good move to make. Kind of cycle through the guys, do the Tampa Bay Rays thing, get some youth and cash out on a guy like Torres. But that's not really what happened here, and he's left kind of with if you've got a surplus of guys, then this is a fine move to make. But Jake didn't have a surplus,
right? And Julian, it's kind of the same thing like we were talking about before the season with Ruthvik, with Vaughn Grissom and Oswald Peraza, right? He was counting on them to carry his shortstop position this year, and then they both got sent down. And you had to, the one thing I said a few episodes ago was like Ruthvik needed to prepare for the possibility that this would happen, and he did not adequately prepare for that. Same here. I don't think that Jake is adequately prepared for second base if something happens with Edward Julian. Maybe he's just not hitting well. And they decide to demote him. Jorge Polanco is on his way back from a rehab assignment. Maybe Jorge Polanco, gets that job back within the next week or two. And suddenly Julian is either not playing every day or they send him back down to the minors. And then Jake's playing the game where he just has a stream waiver wire second baseman, or he has to go make another trade to replace Glaber. In which case, he should have just kept Glaber in the first place, because I'm willing to bet that Glaber is better than any second baseman that he's going to trade for. The other thing I'll add too that makes it weird timing is that he is really banged up in the middle infield right now. Corey Seager, was on the IL. He's going to miss about a month. So it's really only Bo Bichette there in the middle infield besides Julian. And God forbid something happened to Bichette. I mean, he's in a lot of trouble there. There is no depth in that middle infield. So this trade didn't make much sense to me at all. I know Jake really likes Emmanuel Rodriguez and fine, but I don't know, man. Go pick up the next Emmanuel Rodriguez. Don't give up a 26-year-old second baseman batting in the middle of the lineup on a very good team to go get him.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. And he has done a good job picking up guys who could be the next Emmanuel Rodriguez. He's got one of the few self-sustaining farm systems, I'd say.
Yeah, I think Jake does a great job of that. So why not lean into your strength and just continuously develop those guys as opposed to
his player dev team.
Yeah. Be the quote unquote player dev team and pick these guys up instead of just going out and trading significant pieces for them. I keep finding a way to trade prospects and then pick up more prospects that have value and keep trading them. So I don't think twice about trading prospects as much. Maybe Jake has a good. I mean, look at what happened with him last year with Steven Kwan coming up and some of these other guys. Maybe he should just keep some of these guys and just kind of let it play out and trust his ability to pick up these guys. I don't know. We talked a lot about Jake. From Anthony's perspective, I love this from Anthony's perspective. He needed bats. We talked about how good the pitching staff is. Alek Manoah has looked really bad to start this season. I'm a little concerned about him, but
I think Velo's down.
Yeah, the velo's down. There's a lot wrong. He looks like a hot mess, but he still has Sandy Alcantara, who's actually struggled his last two starts too. But he's got some big names there. The hitting, especially with the O'Neal Cruz injury, he needed some help. And I think Gleyber Torres is a great fit. He can fit in the short term and in the long term. And low key, this offense has some pieces now. I mean, Rowdy Tellez had a sneaky good year last year and has been solid to start the year. Jazz Chisholm, Spencer Steer's been really good. Xander Bogart.
He got hurt today. Spencer Steer.
Oh yeah. Hopefully it's not too bad.
Yeah, he got injured in a game where he was meaningless game where he was trailing by 10. Hopefully it's not too bad.
Yeah, he's making me look like I should regret trading him. He looks really good so far, but X-rays were negative on his knee day to day. Steer says he's already doing better, and he may have made it look worse than it was. Okay, so assuming he's fine, it's a pretty solid young infield right there.
Yeah.
Bryce Train too, I didn't mention, and obviously in the outfield, he's got Mike Trout, so he's kind of helping to bolster our case of him as a sneaky contender for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it's sneaky anymore since we keep talking about it, but yeah, this is a solid team.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, let's get into the matchups here. Let's start with the kind of the upset here. EVO beat Conor 7-4-1. Neither of them performed particularly well offensively. The 8 home runs, 31 ribbies for EBO, 10 home runs, 37 ribbies for Conor. Nothing to really write home about. Their run totals were pretty decent, 57 and 50. OBPs were kind of meh, 329, 328. I think the one notable offensive category this week was EBO steals. They had 14. That's one short of the all-time record, and that beats EBO's individual stolen base record. So props to them there. I think the difference in the matchup came down to the pitching. EBO won 4 of the 6 pitching categories, 65 strikeouts, 5 saves, 3.31 ERA, 115 WHIP, all very solid numbers. They both teams had decent production from their starting pitching. They had 4 quality starts, but ultimately EBO pulled this out in a matchup that was a mild upset. But neither team really particularly played well.
No, I'll say, yeah, both teams scored a lot of runs despite low on base percentages, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. Other than that, EBO got 5 saves from 5 different relievers. They got Paul Sewald, Alex Lang, Nick Anderson, AJ Minter, and Kyle Finnegan each got a save. So that's kind of a fun fact.
And they interestingly left a Minter and Sewald save on their bench today. And a DeSclafani quality start on their bench yesterday. I wonder if they didn't start him because he was playing the Tigers. And they didn't.
I think that's all the reason to start someone.
No, it is, unless you're a Tigers fan.
I think Whip was closer going into the day than it ended up being. I think if you're trying to protect Whip and you're going to win Ks, that's not the worst strategy.
No, I think it's very fair, especially because it's not like DeSclafani is like a lock to be very good. He's capable of being blown up.
Yeah, I agree. Match of MVP though, not a lot of stellar performances. I'm going to give it to Cody Bellinger though, who scored 7 runs. He stole 2 of their bases, had a couple of homers, a couple doubles. Yeah, solid week here. He's hitting all right in Chicago now. Not certainly not back to his MVP levels, but he's a perfectly fine outfielder.
Yeah, he struggled a bit to start out the season, but ever since he kind of got on the board of his first home run, he's been playing a lot better. The strikeout rate's back down to 16.1%. That's more in line with that's actually a little lower than his K rate in his MVP year. So he hit the first lefty home run off of Julio Urias in over a year. Almost a year. So that was today. So who knows? Maybe things are on the up and up for him.
Yeah, I'd say so. Solid week for him. Let's move on to the next matchup. None of them really.
Let's talk about let's talk about mine, because mine ended up kind of being low key close. The score didn't end up reflecting it, but Andrew played me really hard, and this wasn't nearly it was interesting on the last day. There's definitely a viable path for Andrew to tie the matchup. But I ended up pulling it out 8-3-1. A lot of close categories here. Both of our teams hit very well this week. I had 17 home runs and 58 ribbies. He had 14 and 52. I had a OBP that was 4 points higher. He had 1 stolen base more than I did, 10-9. And it was 362 to 358 in the OBPs. He both scored a lot of runs, 62-57. So very strong offensive weeks for both of us. I came 1 strikeout short of being the 18th 100 strikeout week. I was really bummed about that. 7 quality starts out of 11 starts for me. 3 saves, 4 holds. We both Andrew and I kind of had similar weeks there. He had 1 more save. We had the same number of holds. He also had a big K week, 86, but big differences in the ERA and WHIP. His ERA is pretty solid, 3.81. The WHIP was a little more questionable to 1.36, and I had a really strong Sunday, and that kind of dropped my ERA down to 2.60 and 0.95 WHIP. So I was just a little better across the board for the most part, but Andrew played great this week.
Yeah, Andrew's playing great. It's a bummer he's 0-2 because he's really playing well. Set his doubles record with 25 this week. I also stole 10 bases. Yeah, he played great. You just played a little better with your 62 runs. Great pitching stats. I think Garrett Cole gets your matchup MVP though. Didn't strike out a ton of guys, but he had a pair of quality starts with a 0.63 whip. Hard to top that.
Yeah, complete game shutout today of the Twins with 10 strikeouts in that game, only 2 hits, 1 walk. So great for him. Also, shout out Max Muncy, who really got back into shape, had 5 home runs this week. And I think 12 RBIs. Don't quote me on that, but he
Yeah, 12 RBIs.
12 RBIs, so he got it back together. Shout out Trey
Yeah.
Turner too, had a 455 OBP. Trying to remember that off the top of my head. I can't get it to load for some reason, and scored a bunch of runs. So
455.
455. Okay, so he is performing as advertised as well.
Yeah, to shout out some of Andrew's guys before we move on. He got a great week from Austin Hayes. He's just crushing the ball. I picked him up in Gallardo, but he scored 11 runs, homered twice, at 3 doubles. Austin Hayes is doing great. Josh Young at a 455 OBP in his lineup. Bobby Witt Jr. Stole 4 bases, 464 OBP, 6 runs. Could have been matchup MVP if Andrew pulled it off. Schwarber played great, but he was playing the Reds. And yeah, Pablo Lopez, 17 strikeouts. I'll give him a shout out as well before we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Swapping out Luis Garcia to get Pablo Lopez is looking really good for Andrew right now.
So far.
So far. But yeah, what matchup do we want to talk about next?
How about Ruthvik is 2-0 now, which is interesting. He beat Daniel and Matt. Neither of these teams played great. Daniel and Matt will not go to 2-0 as we were a little bit hoping they would. They got 9 holds, which beat their personal record. It was close to a league record. But other than that, I mean, the whip was really bad, and they only had 32 Ks and 27 runs. And, Ruthvik didn't play great, but did enough to beat that. And the 8 quality starts are solid, I guess. Especially only since he didn't max out his starts this week.
Yeah, he had 11 starts. It's weird though that he had 8 quality starts, but still had a 4.14 ERA and a 137 WHIP. Like you would think it would be lower.
Yeah, that's kind of odd. I mean, Luis Garcia got blown up, and his bullpen did not pitch the greatest either.
Could I say I got blown up too? Yeah.
Yeah, so he got blown up. But yeah, Evan Phillips pitched badly, and Trevor Gott pitched badly. And like a lot of Shane Bieber got 2 quality starts, but that was a 7 innings, 2 runs, and a 6 innings, 3 runs. So not dominating.
Yeah, not I mean 6 innings, 3 earns, a 4.50 ERA, so that would definitely contribute to maybe the higher ERA. But yeah, I mean, Ruthvik's now kind of interesting, right? I think there are 3 teams in the league now who are 2-0. I mean, you and me, that's kind of to be expected, but Ruthvik now being 2-0, it's an interesting one. I guess play Conor the first week, now play Daniel and Matt. Do you think this is more of a product of a weaker schedule, or do you think that Ruthvik's team might have some staying power and that we were underestimating him this entire time?
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm impressed by the 55 RBI, and I'll say he stole 9 bases, and the pitching quantity numbers look good, but I think it's mostly the weaker schedule.
I think so too. It'll be interesting. You two play next week. Maybe we can kind of see if he's for real or not. But I tend to think it's been some of the weaker schedule more than anything else. And I don't think his numbers overly impressed me this week besides the 8 quality starts. But if he can win through his pitching, like if he can keep posting a number of quality starts, and if he can do it with a little better quality in terms of like the ERA and the WHIP, I think he definitely has a chance to be a playoff team. But I still think he has his work cut out for him offensively.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting offensive week. I'm not going to give him a matchup MVP, but Ryan Mountcastle had a super weird week. 4 homers, 13 RBIs, and a 182 OBP.
Yeah,
So
every
that's
time he came up in a clutch situation, he mashed, but yeah, he did not hit really otherwise. He's been smoking the balls, just some unlucky outs as well. But
yeah, and yeah, Devers similarly 3 homers but a 208 OBP. I'm going to give matchup MVP to Ronald Acuna though with the 552 on base. Stole a couple bases, 6 runs, 6 RBI. Solid week.
yeah, dare I say top 5 dynasty asset?
I would not.
Interesting. All right. Well,
That is his third matchup MVP though, so good for him.
was he matchup MVP last week, or who was Ruthvik's matchup MVP last week?
Ruthvik's matchup MVP last week was Devers.
Devers. Okay, that's right. Um, very fair. Uh, anything else you'd like to say about either of these teams, or are we ready to move on to the next matchup?
Um, I think we're ready to move on to the next matchup. How about let's talk about mine. I had a pretty handy victory over Alex and Zach, and I just think I'm 2-0. My team's holding serve, but we're also crushing it. 62 runs, 396 OBP. I mean, I was great in like every category, basically. I could have had a couple more saves, I suppose, but that's really nitpicking. Um, I wish I played a better team this week because uh I just killed it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing though, I mean, you do have a very soft schedule to open up the season, but when you are playing the softer parts of your schedule, you still want to dominate. And your team has proven these first 2 weeks that they're having a lot of dominant performances. So I think this bodes well for when your schedule gets a little tougher. And yeah, I mean, can't say enough good things about the way your team has played the first 2 weeks. So I'm certainly not looking forward to playing you. Um, just talking about Alex and Zach's team quickly, just nothing really went right. I think the 7 stolen bases was solid. They had a 306 ERA and a 116 whip, which like actually earlier in the week was like a lot lower. And I thought that they wouldn't obviously not break like Connor's record from week 2 a couple years ago, but like have something like in like the 1 ERA range or something. But
Yeah, Brady Singer got blown up on
uh,
Friday, and that kind of ended it for them.
yeah, and they didn't have enough quantity of pitching, I think, to really get the ERA back down after that. So um but yeah, I mean, definitely some stuff to build off of there. And I think of more interest to them, Brett Beatty just got called up. So that'll be another bat for them to slot into that lineup. And Jorge Mateo's played like
Exactly. Yeah, and
all-star for them. So
he is. Yeah, Mateo looks good, and even though Singer got blown up, there are 2 other great young pitchers, Gilbert and Joe Ryan, both pitched great. So it's yeah, definitely good for them.
yeah,
Um,
reason to be
yeah,
optimistic in a loss.
exactly. As for my team, some honorable mention player of the week, Alec Boehm, drove in 9 runs, 469 OBP. Jonathan India is crushing the ball. He hit 4 doubles this week. Jared Kelnick is awesome. Um,
Yeah,
like
shout out
he
to you for like holding on for 2 years. Like, I don't know how you
yeah,
did it.
it was hard, and like, I just kind of decided I had to decide between him and Joe Adell, and Joe Adell had to go. And Kelnick, this was a make or break year for him, and he's making it. He had a 550 OBP this week in my lineup, 3 homers plus another one on my bench. Scored 5 runs. Yeah, great week for him. Juan Soto walked 8 times and scored 4 runs, turning a 2 for 21 week into a 345 OBP. Pitching wise, Framber Valdez was great. 2 quality starts. Shane McClanahan struck out 15. Yu Darvish struck out 17. But matchup MVP is Francisco Lindor. He had a 407 OBP. Stole a base, hit 3 homers, drove in 11 runs, which led my team, and scored 7 runs, which was tied for the lead on my team. Also hit 3 doubles. I think he contributed in all 6 categories for me, so he's the winner.
There you go. Yeah, great pick. Nice to see Lindor, play well for the Mets.
Yeah, exactly. Like he had a rough start to his Met stint, but everything's great. He's the old Francisco Lindor, and I couldn't be happier.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm still annoyed about that trade where you got him.
Yeah, I am very happy about that. Yep. Let's move on though. There are 2 matchups left. The closer of the two, Jake and Yuki. Yuki played all right this week, and he definitely made Jake sweat, I would say, even if he couldn't pull it off.
Yeah, there was definitely a viable path to tying or victory on Saturday, and a little less viable on going into today, but still somewhat viable. But Yuki couldn't really pull it off. I think one problem Yuki has is that because he relies more on the relievers, it's the same issue EBO had when they went all in on the relievers. If he has a couple of blowups, you can just forget ERA and WHIP. He's not going to win that. And Jake's ERA and WHIP were not impressive, really, with a 4.33 ERA and a 1.37 WHIP, but that was able to beat out Yuki's. Neither team was particularly impressive offensively. I guess the 22 doubles from Jake were nice, and the 11 steals from Yuki were great, but all the other categories are pretty lackluster in offensively. Jake kind of volumed his way pitching wise with the 88 strikeouts. He did use all 12 of his starts to get that. So he had 5 quality starts in 12 starts. After in the first week, he had 6 quality starts in 19. So that's now 11 quality starts out of 31. Do you have any continued concerns with the pitching staff? Worse ERA and WHIP than last week, but a little better ratio of quality starts to total starts.
So let me tell you this fun fact, and we'll see how concerned you are about Jake. Andrew would have been 3 strikeouts and 2 quality starts away from 12-0ing Jake. Andrew would have absolutely dominated Jake this week, and yet he lost 3-8 to 1 to you. Yeah, I'm concerned. He's getting that quantity. It's kind of not. It's kind of like back to the 2021 from what we'd see from Jake, where he'd push 100 strikeouts, but yet he'd have an ERA north of 4. So it's not the most promising, I would say. Like Kevin Gausman was good, but like Nathan Eovaldi did not pitch very well. Tyler McGill was kind of Edward Cabrera was kind of Castillo was great. Luis Castillo was excellent. I will give him that. But yeah, and let's give props to Yuki real quick for his ERA and WHIP were like on historically bad paces midweek, and yet he came back in nearly 1 ERA. So way to go for that. But yeah, no, I'm not loving the pitching. Jake hit fine, but yeah, overall, this could have been a winnable matchup for Yuki.
Yeah, definitely a winnable matchup for Yuki. I think, overall he, kept it close with Jake, which, given that he's playing one of the better teams in the league is exactly, what you, hope for, and anything better is a bonus. But Yeah, I think, definitely some props for Yuki's team. Yuki now 1-1 on the season with a big win over Erik and a loss to Jake. I think all things considered, he has to be pretty happy with that start. As for Jake, he's now 1-1 with a loss to me and a win over Yuki. I don't know if I'd be feeling super great if I was Jake though. I think your point about 2021 pitching staff, Jake, kind of holds true for the whole team. The whole team. This feels like his 2021 team. I mean, you take Glaber out, so the offense is getting a little worse. I know he had a Kyle Tucker in the offseason, so this is probably still a net better offense than it was last season. But then you're really taking hits on the pitching staff. Like, I wonder if some of that. I wonder if this is as good of a team as it was last season. And now that I'm saying this, I'm sure he's going to go out and just go ball out next week against Erik. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm overreacting to the first 2 weeks in the Glaber trade. I don't know.
Yeah, it's still early. So not a lot of great offensive performances. Kyle Tucker was good. Josh Bell was good. Matchup MVP though is going to go to Luis Castillo with his 2 quality starts, 14 Ks, 138 ERA, 0.77 WHIP. Pitched 7 shutout innings on Sunday to really lock it up there. Only 2 hits. Yeah, phenomenal week. No complaints there. Even the rest of the pitching staff didn't quite hold it up.
No, absolutely. All right, and I think there's one more matchup to talk about. Which one is that?
That is Erik beat Anthony 10-2. Yeah, Erik didn't Erik didn't hit very well, but he pitched great. His pitchers were maybe the best of any pitching staff this week with a 2.14 ERA, 107 WHIP, 80 Ks, 8 quality starts. Hitting wise, I feel like this is kind of the type of week we see from Erik a lot. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen 19 doubles, 51 RBIs, 34 runs, 330 on base percentage like 4 times last year. Like this just feels like a very Erik stat line. Like I feel like he always drives in more runs than he scores. I don't know if that's something you've noticed. Like he doesn't score a lot of runs, but he always drives in a lot of runs.
Yeah, I guess like he has a lot of guys who bat in the middle of team's order. Thinking like Vinny P does, Jose Ramirez does, William Contreras, Teoscar Hernandez, like Shohei Ohtani. Like these are big like middle of the lineup hitters. Like it's kind of the opposite of me. I have a lot of leadoff guys, so like I'm leading the league in runs. He's just a big RBI guy. So that doesn't surprise me. I think you're right. It ends up looking kind of pedestrian sometimes in the hitting stats for Erik, but he usually pushes the right buttons there and kind of earns the benefit of the doubt, even if it's not the sexiest offensive week.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to pick a matchup MVP. Quick shout out to Brent Rooker, who is with Oakland apparently now, and he hit 3 homers with a 421 OBP. Showed to him. Wander Franco hit 5 doubles, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, if we want to talk about someone breaking out, a la Jerry Kelenic, that's what Wander's doing.
Yeah, Wander's phenomenal. I think yeah, this is the year Wander. He's got a 379 OBP, slugging 661. My God. Yeah, no, this is the Wander we were promised. So it's nice to see after a slow year him doing this. I will give matchup MVP, and it's a tough one. I'll give it to Corbin Burns. I don't really like giving matchup MVP to a 1-start starting pitcher, but he what a great start it was. 8 Ks in 8 innings, only allowing 3 hits. And no walks too.
Did Erik not have a good 2-star pitcher?
Dylan Cease was a solid 2-start pitcher, but he walked 7 guys in 11 innings, so I didn't really want to give it to him. And he only got 1 quality start.
I told you that was my issue with him going into the season, and so I didn't think he'd repeat. I watched that start against Baltimore today. It was It was not his finest work.
No, yeah, it was not, but he's still on the whole had a solid week. I'm comfortable giving it to Burns though. Javi Baez when he was in Eric's lineup at a 467 OBP. How about that?
Jesus Christ. I mean, even
Hey,
the Tigers don't want him in the lineup. The Tigers benched him this week.
yeah. Hey, well, he's on a 3-game hitting streak.
Good for him, I
But
guess. Do you want to guess what his WRC plus is on the season?
29.
Okay, you went too low. It's 43.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's still very bad.
Yeah, very. He done.
That's about it. Anthony's team we haven't mentioned um yet. I think it was a rough hitting week, so Gleyber Torres is going to be much needed in this lineup. Um he stole 7 bases, which was nice. That was one of the 2 categories he won. Really, oh my God, wait, Anthony went the whole week without a quality start.
Yeah,
Um
no quality starts, no saves, just 3 holds. Like it was just so like Alcantara. It's weird too because like all the aces had 2 start weeks today because this is like the all the guys who pitch opening day like are kind of still pitching on the same-ish days for now. Like Sandy Alcantara went 6 innings, 4 earned today, and Manoa got blown up. He got 5 solid innings from Heaney, 5 and 2. He got a paddock from Braxton Garrett, 5 and 2/3 within 1 earned. Uh,
Andrew Heaney had 2 5-inning, 2 hits, no runs starts this week. But one of them he had 10 Ks and the other he had 4. But yeah, 2 good starts where he just got pulled. Got pulled after 5.
and then both of Anthony's 6 inning starts this week came with 4 earned runs, one from Christian Javier and one from the Sandy Alcantara one I just mentioned. So it's kind of weird how it worked out, especially for as much as we tout up this pitching staff. Feels like a down week for the pitching staff. I mean, he still got 70 Ks out of it. But yeah, even too with the saves, like David Bednar has 4 saves on the season, but none of them came this week. They all came last
Yeah.
week. So
Yeah.
feels like an anomaly for him given some of the names. I think the pitching staff's going to be fine, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say before we dive into matchups for next week, Anthony had 10 homers this week. 4 were from Rowdy Tellez and 3 were from Sean Murphy. So he only had 5 players hit a home run, and 7 of his 10 homers were from the same 2 guys.
That's nuts. My God. Yeah, weird week from him. I'm sure he is glad that is over. And with that, let's turn to page 2 next week. There's a couple of very interesting matchups next week. Which one did we pick? I think there's an obvious.
There's an obvious one. Let's first mention me and Ruthvik is the only matchup of undefeated teams this week. We're both 2-0. The winner will be 3-0. The loser will be 2-1. Hey, if Ruthvik beats me this week, he's in first place. He's 3-0, and he's so that certainly would be something. But the real matchup to watch is going to be 1-1 Erik versus 1-1 Jake. Both of these teams were in the semis last week, but they haven't really looked like their world-beating selves. I think, particularly on the hitting side. I mean, Erik's pitching dominated this past week, obviously, as we were just saying. But one of these teams is going to be 1-2 this week. After this week, and there will be some questions asked.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on both of these teams. I'd say Erik, especially because after he plays Jake, he plays me. So he really needs to win one of these two. if not both, after the loss to Yuki. But yeah, neither of these schedules are early season schedules have been particularly forgiving for either of these teams, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. It's the our second matchup now of semis teams, so this will be a fun one.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely one that Erik is going to be feeling pressure to win. And yeah, we'll see if he does. And let's dive into those predictions. How did we do last week? I already know the answer, but I want you to tell me how much I beat you by.
Yeah, I need to stop making like weird bold predictions. Like I don't know why I started doing that this year. But yeah, so I picked myself to beat Andrew, you picked me to tie, I won. Uh we both picked you and Jake to beat Alex and Zach and Yuki respectively. We both picked Daniel and Matt to beat Ruthvik and lost that. I picked Conor to win. You picked EBO to win. You were correct about that. And for some reason, I picked Anthony to beat Erik. I was feeling the upset vibes, and that just did not work out. So you won 4-1-1 on the week. I won 3-3. That moves me to 5-6-1, and that moves me to 7-3, or moves you, sorry, to 7-3 and 2. Since you won, or since you had the better record, you get to pick first this week. Whenever you are ready, good sir.
Right. I think you'll beat the Bellies, or rather the Drury. I think that Anthony will beat Conor. That's a bit of a bold pick, but I think Conor's team is in a bit of a tailspin. I
Honestly,
think,
I think it'd be bold if you picked it the other way.
mm, yeah. I think Yuki's going to beat Alex and Zach. I think Andrew is going to beat EBO. He's finally getting on the board with that first win. I am going to pick Jake to beat Erik. I think Jake's team has um I don't know. I think Jake will beat Erik. Um I don't know why, gut feeling, I guess. And speaking of gut feelings, my tie of the week, I think I'm gonna tie Ruthvik. Um
Oh, I like
I
that.
don't know. Ruthvik is the only matchup of undefeated teams. I think we're both gonna still come away undefeated. I don't know. Like early season Ruthvik is always very spooky. Um before before this team realizes that it's supposed to lose. Like I feel like each of the last 2 years, and I'm going to fact check this, but I feel like each of the last 2 years I've had an early season tie against Ruthvik that I should have won, and I think that's going to happen again this year.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. Bold prediction. All right. All right. So time for my picks. I think I'll beat Daniel and Matt and go to 3-0. I think Anthony will beat Conor. I know Connor's the one coming off a playoff but appearance, but like I said, I think Anthony at this point is the better team, especially with the pitching injuries that Connor has. Uh, I think Yuki's going to beat Alex and Zach. I think Andrew's going to beat EBO as well. Andrew's been playing really well. He's due for a win. He's just gotten unlucky with the way the schedule's fallen. Uh, I'm gonna pick you to beat Ruthvik. I don't buy this tie nonsense. And I'm gonna pick Erik to beat Jake. For two reasons. One, I trust Erik's management a little better. I think just generally, I feel like Erik gets a little bit of a benefit of the doubt for me when things are closer. And two, I had Erik ranked above Jake in my power rankings going into the season, and I don't think anything has really changed my opinion of how I rank those two teams. And if anything, maybe Jake's team takes a hit since he doesn't have Glaber now. So, yeah, give me Erik over Jake there. I think Jake drops to 1 and 2.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, I can confirm. Week 8 of last year, I tied Ruthvik in week 5, and week 5 of 2021, I tied Ruthvik. So I have each of the past 2 seasons tied my first matchup with Ruthvik.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's certainly playing well to start this season. I mean, he's 2-0. Maybe they're not the sexiest wins, but he's getting at it somehow. So we'll see. I think this will be a big measuring stick week, where if he puts up if he beats you with a very strong week, I think maybe we need to kind of adjust our expectations of him. Especially given the fact he's only 1 game out of a playoff spot last year. But if he doesn't pull it off, then I think maybe we're kind of more right about him from the get-go, from our off-season kind of predictions of him.
Yeah, and week 3 is kind of a measuring stick week for everyone. Real quick, one last thing that I just remembered, that I can't believe I had forgotten until just now. One of my favorite fun facts from league records when we figured those out was that Ruthvik had exactly 7 quality starts 10 times, but he had never had more than 7. Well, this week he had 8. So it just took one regular length week for Ruthvik to get that monkey off his back.
It surprises me that he's never had more than 7 before this week. I mean, it's not like the easiest thing to do, but kind of given the quality of starting pitchers he's had over the years, I would have thought he would have had a week with 8 or more.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, that's good for Ruthvik. Hey, if he keeps that up next week, maybe he beats you if he's posting 8 quality starts again.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, any final words from this very stolen base heavy week?
No, I don't think so. Another very exciting week in the books, and cannot wait to see how week 3 turns out. Always a good time recording with you, Cam.
All right, it always is. Yeah, see you next week for week 3.
I know it's up for me. If you steal my sunshine, making sure I'm not in too deep. If you steal my sunshine, keep bursting on my feet. If you steal my sunshine.
This podcast is good.